Energy with naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theories that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swing of a pendulum to the waves in the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. In the same way, things such as rocks and minerals vibrate very slowly and at speeds that are imperceptible to us. Living things such as plants, animals, and man vibrate faster and appear to be alive. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is if we take everything in our own universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita as she explores questions such as, what are we made of? Why do we get sick? How can I live a more balanced and whole life? Call in and talk to her and her thought-provoking guests. Send us your questions and get the help you need to move beyond any obstacle or challenges that may be affecting your life, right from the source. So stay tuned and explore your possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. So as we announced last week, we started a new little segment on the show, and it's the Question of the Week. And we have a winner. The Question of the Week is brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. So last week's question was a ghosty question, and it was, what kind of hauntings does someone experience when the ghost appears to repeat over and over like a loop of film? And the answer to the question, if you didn't know, was a residual haunting. And the winner of the book that we gave away last week, which was The Resonance Key by Marie Jones and Larry Flaxman, was Peter Brandon from Somerset, New Jersey. So congratulations, Peter. Your book is going to be out to you in the mail. After the first break, we will be announcing this week's question. So when we go to break, you want to make sure that you get back on time to answer the question and win. This week, we're giving away The Pyramid Code by Carmen Bolder. It is a five program, so it's 5 hours of DVD video about the ancient Egyptians, a fascinating new series that reveals the amazing, sophisticated knowledge of the ancient Egyptians. It kind of goes along with our theme today. Also, if you are in the Texas, Louisiana area, you might want to check out the History, Haunts, and Legends Conference in Jefferson, Texas. I'll be there talking about cleansing your home of residual energy, goes along with last week's question, and how to deal with ghosts on an energetic level. If you want them gone, you can come and find out how to get rid of them. So today's show, we kind of have like an ancient history kind of theme thing going on. In the first hour, we have a repeat guest, a good friend, Frank Joseph. His new book is about Atlantis, and we're uncovering the Atlantean influence. In the second hour, we have Steve Myers coming on, and we're going to be talking about the lost technologies of the Great Pyramids. Exciting stuff. So let me tell you a little bit about Frank and get him on the air, because really good new book. I mean, we've had him on several times before with some of his other books. This one, I think, and I told him earlier, I think is my fave. So let me tell you about Frank. Frank Joseph is the author of a dozen published books about metaphysics, military, and ancient history released in as many foreign languages. He has been a repeat guest with Shirley MacLaine on her internet program, with Whitley Strieber on Dreamland, Coast to Coast with Art Bell, The Jeff Rense Show. He's also a featured writer for Fate magazine, Command, and Atlantis Rising magazine. His articles about military aviation have been published by the Department of Defense. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Frank Joseph. Hey, Frank, how's it going?
Oh, I'm really happy to be back here again, Rita. It's always a great pleasure to be on your program.
Well, we love having you because you always, come up with these new topics. I mean, they're not new topics, but, the way that you investigate or report just, I don't know, I think you just kind of cut through a lot of the malarkey, that's a nice word, and just really present facts, or facts as you see them, and, give good explanations as to, different historical perspectives, your perspective, blah, 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 and it's all good. And so your new book, Atlantis in 2012, when I first saw that you had this title come out, I just thought, what unlikely bedfellows. So let's start here. What possible relationship is there between Atlantis and 2012?
That is an excellent question, and the answer to that was far more dramatic than I ever expected. I began writing that book only about 3 years ago because of all of the interest, the general popular interest in the Maya calendar and what's supposed to happen in 2012. And of course, there are many books now out on the possibility of some major change taking place on the winter solstice of 2012, December 21st. That supposedly is the end of the Maya calendar. And I read a number of these books, and I found them all very interesting, but they're very contradictory. And I wanted to know, well, really, is there anything to this Maya calendar, anything that we really can expect? And I remember that the first time I heard about the Maya calendar was about 25 years ago when I investigated. I was in Yucatan for the first time. I was amongst all the pyramid sites like Tikal and, of course, Chichen Itza and places like that. And it was there that I first learned about the Maya calendar. And the Maya calendar was really not invented by the Maya at all. They were the inheritors of the calendar, as it turns out, from a previous people known as the Olmecs. This is a name that has been applied by archaeologists to an unknown people, but they are the first known civilized people in the Americas. And the Olmecs began their civilization abruptly about 1,500 years before Christ, about 3,500 years ago. Now, there's a lot of debate over that time date now. It looks as though their roots for their civilization went back at least another 1,500 years. So more likely, the Olmecs go back to about the same time as ancient Egypt, strangely enough. Egypt began as a dynastic civilization 5,000 years ago. At the same time, the Olmecs would appear to have started here. Now, there's debate over that time, but it appears that there are more and more archaeologists that are beginning to think that perhaps the Olmecs did go back to 5,000. Well, in any case, the Olmecs were the earliest possessors of this calendar, which the Maya later inherited. And after the Maya passed away, the Aztecs took it up. So it's not really a Maya calendar. It's what is known as a Mesoamerican calendar. Mesoamerican refers to all those civilizations that flourished in Mexico and Middle and Central America for about the last 5,000 years, beginning 5,000 years ago. And this calendar is a remarkable achievement of unparalleled mathematical genius. It's so complex, there's no way I could possibly even give you a thumbnail sketch of it in the short time we have here. But nonetheless, it is nothing less. The Maya calendar is nothing less than an astronomical computer of high sophistication. And you can see the Maya calendar expressed in an artifact. It's called the Aztec Calendar Stone. And the Aztec Calendar Stone is a great stone disk. It's at the Archaeological Museum in Mexico City. There have been numerous images of it. I'm sure our listeners are familiar with what it looks like. It's a very complex stone disk. And at the center of the disk, there is a face, a rather hideous face of what appears to be a man or a male figure with its tongue sticking out of its mouth and their human hearts on its tongue. And surrounding this hideous visage is a beautiful arrangement of symbols, dozens and dozens of symbols. And the Aztec calendar stone is an inheritance, it's a crystallization of the Maya calendar, just as the Maya calendar was a development of the Olmec calendar, the Mesoamerican calendar. So I went back and I tried to find out, where did this calendar really originate? Did the Olmec develop it? Appears not. The Olmec civilization appeared in Mexico full-blown. There is no previous development. It just appeared. And with all of the great pyramids that they built, there's a great pyramid that's in La Venta, and marvelous sculpture, these giant heads. Some of them look like West African heads. Others look like Semitic faces. Very international, multicultural representations of peoples in Olmec culture. And there's no primitive period or earlier development. That's just all fully blown there. And the calendar is part of this magnificent, rich culture. This is strict archaeology now. This is not any lunatic fringe interpretation. This is now understood by mainstream archaeologists that the Olmec just simply, well, to put it bluntly, their civilization was imported. It was not developed in Mexico. It was developed someplace else and imported to Mexico, where it flourished for many centuries. And the stories of the Maya, we don't have too much from mythological material from the Olmecs, but we do have a lot of mythological material from the Maya and the Aztecs. And they tell us that their civilization, they repeat this over and over again, that their civilization, along with the Maya calendar, came after a great flood had destroyed a previous kingdom far out across the Atlantic Ocean. And they have various names for this previous civilization. The Aztecs called it Aztlan, A-Z-T-L-A-N, which means the White Island. It's also referred to as the Field of Reeds. And they say that a great storm overcame this kingdom, and that before it sank into the sea, the feathered serpent, along with his followers, which were mostly magicians and sorcerers, arrived in great fleets on the eastern seaboard of Mexico. And there they shared with them all the high culture of this lost kingdom of Aztlan. And if you go on the other side of the world, you have a place called Atlantis. It was described by the greatest philosopher of classical period, which is, of course, Plato, in the 4th century BC. And he tells us in his surviving dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, that this high civilization also perished in a great natural catastrophe, was also located in the Atlantic Ocean. It is this event that sparked Mesoamerican civilization, Aztec and Maya civilization, Olmec civilization, and was responsible for the creation, or the importation, rather, of this Maya calendar. So here is the connection between, the beginning of the connection between Atlantis and 2012, which is, of course, the end date of the Maya calendar. I then was interested to find out what exactly does the Maya calendar say. Now, I don't want to be able to put on my own particular beliefs one way or the other. What does it really say? What did the Maya say about it? And they said, and this goes back again to the Atlantis story, they said that there were four major global catastrophes that have afflicted mankind over the past. And each one of these catastrophes was referred to by the Aztecs as a sun, S-U-N, or an epoch. And the last of these catastrophes is known as Atl. It was a great flood that pushed mankind to the brink of extinction, they said, and destroyed this previous culture that brought the Maya calendar. And that the next sun, or the next catastrophe, was scheduled to take place in the year 2012. It was to begin on the sunrise of the winter solstice, December 21st. Now, this is what the Aztec priests told the Spanish friars more than 500 years ago when they explained their calendrics, when they explained the Maya calendar, the Aztec calendar stone. And they told the Spanish friars that this would be given a name, that this catastrophe that's to take place in 2012 is going to be called a rebellion of the earth. And the Spanish friars thought, well, does this mean an earthquake that's going to destroy the world, or almost destroy the world? And the Aztecs said they didn't know, but that was the name that they were given. It didn't appear to be an earthquake. It's called a rebellion of the earth. And that it was going to be brought about, this catastrophe, was going to be brought about by the sun, literally a sun demon. They refer to him as Bolon Yokte. And Bolon Yokte is like their Satan. And that this satanic figure, Bolon Yokte, would come out of the sun, trailing with him a host of solar demons, and that they are going to ravage the earth on begin to ravage the earth on December 21st, 2012. Now, this is what the Aztecs and the Maya preserved in their traditions. This isn't anything that I've made up.
I think that's interesting because oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead,
I
Rita.
just think that's interesting because, like on, I'm a big Discovery History Channel person. They've been talking about like solar flares and the decreased electromagnetic field around the Earth, and if we have big solar flares that happen, we don't have really good protection that we did in the past, and we can be affected by them, blah, 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 blah. And it sounds like this actually kind of fits in, as opposed to, Planet X or an asteroid hitting us. I mean, it fits more with what they're actually saying.
Well, it's interesting, and I took that as a starting point, just as you point out. I just wanted to see what exactly did the Maya and the Aztecs say about this, what would happen. Now, did they say that the end of the fifth sun, that's what we live in now, the end of the fifth sun on the 21st of December 2012, would this be the absolute end of time, as they say? And the Maya and the Aztecs and the Zapotecs, other peoples, they believed that human behavior affects the physical nature of the cosmos. Now, this is an extremely advanced idea, a concept, which modern physics has actually accepted for over 100 years now. And that is, it's understood now, just as you said, as the promo to your own program pointed out, that there is no matter in the old accepted sense, that everything is energy. Everything is different frequencies of energy. And that the only difference between your finger and a table is the rearrangement of energy form. And that theoretically, more than theoretically, we're told now, you could actually pass your finger through a table if you could rearrange the frequencies between the molecular constitution of your finger and that of the table. So everything is energy form. Things are affected by everything else. That's now understood. The experiment is influenced by the presence of the experimenter. That's actually an axiom now. It's understood. So for the Maya or the Aztecs to say that human behavior actually affects things like weather and the physical constitution of the universe is not really that far out anymore. It was totally far out when it was told to the Spaniards 500 years ago, but now it's a possibility, more than a possibility. Physics accepts this. And they said that if human beings can get their act together, as it were, and they can live in accord with nature, that all of these natural catastrophes can be either totally avoided or else survived. However, if human beings continue to act out of sync with nature, they will be extricated because nature does not allow severe challenges to its laws. And according to the Maya and the Aztecs, regardless of all of the complexity of their religions, it was all they were based on one simple principle. And the principle was that God, he, she, or it, expresses his will through natural law. Therefore, human beings that follow natural law are in accord with the Creator. And that when human beings no longer follow natural law, they're out of accord with the Creator and catastrophe results. And that there have been 4 previous mass extinctions, according to the Mesoamericans, and that we are facing now a 5th one. And this is the one that's associated with the sun, although it's referred to as a rebellion of the earth. Now, I know that's a mystery. I don't understand it, but that's what it was called. That's what the Aztecs and the Maya say. Now, so I wanted to find out, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think it's interesting because, I've never heard that there were 4 previous worlds specifically associated with the Maya. I've heard it with the Hopi, that we're working on, the age of man, at this, the end of the cycle when the prophecies are fulfilled, we would end the age of animals and move into the age of man, and that was Hopi. And I've never heard specifically the Mayan calendar actually talking about us having 4 ages as well.
Well, now you've opened a really interesting door there, Rita, and I've investigated that in my book too. And that is that the Aztecs and the Maya, they do talk about these 4 previous world catastrophes. So do the Hopi, so do the Norse, the Vikings, so do especially the ancient Hindus. So you have this, and in China, you have these traditions in other parts of the world totally unconnected from each other, who also talk about previous world catastrophes. Some say 3, but most of them say 4 of these world catastrophes. The Hopi are the same in that regard. They have different names for them. These are cultural inflections only. But it's interesting, isn't it, that you have people completely unrelated to each other who are still talking about these previous 4, usually a quartet of world catastrophes that utterly obliterated human beings for the most part. A few survivors were able to survive and rebuild civilization, and then they go through the same cycle again. So I wanted to find out, is there any scientific possibility, a correlation rather, between what the Maya and the Aztecs were saying about 2012 and what does science say? What's the possibility there? So as you say, I looked into the possibility of Planet X and asteroids and all this other stuff. I found nothing like that whatsoever. As far as Planet X is concerned, it's a possibility. I don't rule that out, but I didn't see it happening. As far as we know, there's not going to be any asteroid collision going to take place at that time. The nearest possible asteroid contact is going to be in about another 200 years, and that doesn't even look that close. So I didn't see anything like that. For the capacity of any kind of, that would bring about a world catastrophe, cataclysm. However, I did find 2 things that work out incredibly well, and they also work out well in terms of what the Maya were saying, that this is going to be a solar event. This is what the Aztecs were saying, that the next catastrophe, this worldwide cataclysm, will be brought about because of a conflict between the Earth and the Sun. That's the basis for what they're saying. I found out 2 interesting things, and these are things that are really kind of unequivocal as far as the scientific community is concerned, and that is the recurrence of an ice age. The ice ages are caused, it's now understood, because of a brilliant Serbian geophysicist about 70 years ago. His name was Milakovic, and he determined that the ice ages that the world has gone through in the past, we go through a series of ice ages about every 12,000 years, very serious ones about every 20 to 24,000 years, and that these ice ages are caused by a wobble in the Earth's rotation about the Sun. And this wobble creates an angle, a relationship between the direct rays of the Sun and our planet. And that when this wobble takes place, the ice ages correlate to this wobble. This is now understood as generally pretty well accepted. There's still some debate about it, but really quite diminishing. And it's generally accepted by the scientific community that the ice ages are caused by this wobble about every 12,000 years. The last ice age we had that ended about 12,000 years ago was relatively mild. It was severe as it was relatively mild. There have been ice ages in the past in which the entire planet has been sheeted in ice. The entire planet has been sheeted in ice. And all life on Earth was reduced to a minimum, mostly just in the sea. We know that this took place at least twice, probably more often. An ice age like that would be extremely rough. However, most ice ages are of a less severe quality, but still quite bad. Well, how soon can we expect the next ice age? Right now, as it turns out. The general scientific consensus is that we're not overdue for an ice age. This is just it. It's starting. It's just about starting. And ice ages do not...
No global warming?
Global warming, believe it or not,
is the opposite of ice age.
Yeah, I know. Actually, global warming is part of it. It's extremely complex weather system that's not entirely understood. But the global warming is an adjunct to it. It's probably the global warming we're having is probably caused by mankind, but that will be put into a completely different context by what the next ice age will take place. The next ice age is definitely going to happen. There's no doubt about it. It will definitely happen, and it will happen rapidly. It will not happen gradually. We saw a movie called The Day After Tomorrow. It probably won't happen that fast, but it will happen. It could happen very quickly. We now know that ice ages end abruptly, and they begin abruptly. For example, the last ice age wiped out the mastodons in such a way that the mastodons are found, many of the remains of mastodons are found with food still in their stomachs. And one of the best preserved examples is a mastodon that was found in Siberia that had still the buttercups that were undigested in its stomach. And huge numbers of mastodon bones have been found all thrown together in some horrendous catastrophe. So the flooding that takes place and the abrupt ecological changes are just, the alterations of climate are just horrendous. It does happen. Okay, that's going to happen.
Might interject something right here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Might ask the question. You know, because you kind of put like the Olmecs and the Egyptian civilization at 3,000 BC, give or take, 500 years or whatever, 1,000 years. Wouldn't it make sense that the flood that destroyed Atlantis be the end of the sudden end of the Ice Age, the last Ice Age, which was like 10 to 12,000 BC?
That's very difficult to correlate something as precise as human history with geological history. Human history is so narrow; it only really encompasses a few tens of thousands of years at most, or if you want to go back a little bit further in evolutionary terms, perhaps a few 100,000 years. And geological timescale is so much larger, and it's really harder to correlate that. However, I definitely believe that there is a correlation between the Maya calendar, which is really the Atlantis calendar, and these catastrophes, these floods, because the Atlanteans went through, obviously, they survived, some of them survived this catastrophe, this worldwide catastrophe. And I think that they built their calendar around this recurrence of these catastrophes because they're pretty important. How else can you really create such a reliable calendar except through a global event that everybody remembers, that everybody was aware of, at least for many, many generations. And then it survived, of course, in myth, and I think it also survived in a kind of a general trauma that we have picked up. So, I hear the music, so...
Right, there's the music. Yeah, it means we need to take a break. So when we come back, let's continue talking about what you think might happen after the 2012. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Stay tuned, because after the break, we're going to ask the question of the day and win the Pyramid Code DVD set. We'll be right back.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
Sensitive to energy? Want to explore the world beyond the five senses? Looking for a new career as an alternative healthcare practitioner? Then the Institute of Applied Energetics, Medical Intuition, and Energy Medicine training programs may be right for you. Our comprehensive curriculum provides students with a deep understanding of how to detect, evaluate, and transform the subtle body, as well as techniques for correcting energetic imbalances that may underscore a person's ability to experience radiant health. So if you are sensitive to energy, contact the Institute of Applied Energetics right away. Be a catalyst for changing the way healthcare is done around the world. Visit www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com and start your new career today. How would you like to live long and enjoy great health? How about creating solid bones and whiter teeth? Strengthen your heart and eyes and have radiant, youthful-looking skin. There is an ancient health and longevity secret that has been used for millennia in Egypt, India, and China that can help you achieve this. For the first time in the modern world, Pearlsium brings this ancient wellness secret to you. For more information about Pearlsium, visit www.productsforthesoul.com. Before we get back to the show, I would like to thank all of you for tuning into Just Energy Radio. Many of the people I've helped over the years were listeners just like you. If you're at a junction in your life, don't stand alone at this important time. Call me or send me an email. We can set up a private consultation so that you too can experience health, healing, and wholeness in your life. To find out more about the services I offer, visit www.soulhealer.com.
And now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm Dr. Rita Louise, and here's the question of the week, brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics, www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And the winner of the question of the week will win the Pyramid Code by Carmen Bolder. It's a fascinating new series that reveals the amazing sophisticated knowledge of the ancient Egyptians. So this week's question is, this incredibly ancient Egyptian god was the original god of the dead before Osiris took over the position. I'll repeat it. This incredibly ancient Egyptian god, and you cannot answer, Frank, because I know you know the answer, was the original god of the dead before Osiris took over the position. If you know what the answer is, go to www.justenergyradio.com, click on the contact button, and send us an email. The person who answers the question correctly first will win the DVD set. Very cool. So I hope we get lots of responses. Anyway, Frank, we were talking about potential catastrophes, and you were talking about ice ages, and we were going to maybe talk about, I don't understand how ice has to do with, like, us burning up or whatever you said, the Maya said, about I'm sorry, no brain cells, but, about us kind of burning up and a fire. I'll just add my own words.
No, actually, the Maya and the Aztec don't say that the world is going to be burned up. They just say that there's going to be a hostility of some kind, between a difficulty of some kind between the Earth and the Sun. So you can take that, as possibly being the deteriorating relationship, the angle of the Earth in relationship to the Sun, and this will bring about an ice age. Now, yes, an ice age is going to take place. There's no doubt about that. But do we know that it's going to take place in 2012? And do we know that it's going to take place on December 21st, going to start then? We don't know, and it's rather unlikely. Again, trying to fit geological timescales into our own history is really rough. It's like impossible. So it's possible that an ice age will begin to ensue in 2012. It's a possibility. A likelihood, I would say probably not, but nonetheless it's in the ballpark. However, there is a possibility of another event which is very possible, and that is something called a Carrington event. The Carrington event refers to an event that took place around 1850. I don't have my book in front of me. I think it was 1853, something like that. In 1853, it was noted that there was a very large amount of solar activity taking place at the time. There were aurora borealis activities, very beautiful. The night lights were everywhere. The northern lights were seen all over the northern hemisphere, some as far south, I think, as Texas, something like that. And it happens sometimes. It's very beautiful. So what? But at the same time that this happened in the 1850s, all of the telegraph wires across the United States and Europe went dead. They were shorted out. There were fires, minor fires, on some of the telegraph poles. Everything got fried. Went out. Nobody could figure out what had happened. Of course, no one was hurt. Telegraphs are relatively new at that time, and all they had to do was restring some wires. So it was no catastrophe in any sense of the word, but everybody was mystified. What on earth had happened? Well, nothing on Earth had happened at all. Something in the sun had happened. There was a very brilliant astronomer at that time in the 19th century. His name was Richard Carrington. He was an American astronomer. And he deduced that a major solar flare had taken place that had sent so much electromagnetic energy into our atmosphere that it had interfaced with the telegraph systems, the electrical telegraph systems at that time, and had shorted them all out. And that has since been accepted as an absolute fact. So that, in fact, did happen, and events like that are now referred to after Richard Carrington as the Carrington event. Now, in 1853, electronics was a new phenomenon and was limited only to telegraph instruments. So there was no harm done, certainly no permanent harm done. The next Carrington event that took place was in the early 1920s, when it was noted at that time that, again, there was the presence of the northern lights in great abundance everywhere. And at this time, there were some a little more serious consequences. There were a couple of electrical control stations and railroads that burst into flame. Nobody was hurt again. Fires were minor, but nonetheless, the electricity throughout much of the northern hemisphere in Europe and especially in New York suffered. There were major blackouts that took place at the time. Again, these were repaired, but it was noted that this had happened. This is, of course, at a time when electronics was still had advanced a lot more since the 19th century. Telephone wires went dead and things like that, but again, they were repaired. That Carrington event was a minor one, by the way. The Carrington event that took place in the 1850s, that was a major event. That was a large one. The one that took place in the 1920s was relatively small, but still did some damage. Again, nobody was hurt. There have been several Carrington events since then, mostly of a small nature. The largest, more large Carrington event that took place in the 20th century happened in 1964. In 1964, you may remember the great New York blackout that took place.
I lived in New York then.
And all of New York.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, you'll never forget that. And all of New York went dead electrically. All the lights went out, and because the power systems were overloaded suddenly by this major solar flare that took place. Well, the world in 1964 and the world in 2010 and 2012 is a different world. Everything now is completely run and based on electricity, especially computers. Everything is in our entire Western civilization and beyond Western civilization, if you want to refer to as our global civilization, now everything is run by computers and by electrical grids. If a Carrington event of the magnitude of the one that took place in the 1850s took place today, our civilization would be shaken to its absolute foundations. You would not be able to even flush your toilets or to run your faucets. You wouldn't be able to open your electric garage door.
No internet.
No internet. All banking would stop. The hospitals have enough residual energy to last at most 3 days. And after that, there would be no hospital power whatsoever. Everything that the police and fire departments depend upon for their communications would be over. All the reserve energy forms that we have, backup systems, would last at most 3 to 4 days. After that, it'd be nothing. And the damage that would be created by a Carrington event today would be, estimates are that it would take 9 to 13 months to restore, perhaps much longer. So we're talking about a situation in which about a year, more or less, we would have absolutely no electricity. Anything that depends on electricity would be out. Absolutely everything. No water, nothing. What that would mean in terms of the social dislocation that would take place alone would be catastrophic. We have now in the United States, just gang members alone, it's estimated 100,000 gang members that are mostly kept in check by law enforcement. To give you an idea how many people make up 100,000, the German army, the German Sixth Army that surrendered at Stalingrad in 1943 numbered 90,000. So we have over 100,000. We have literally an army larger than the German Sixth Army at Stalingrad in the United States that's armed to the teeth, that would be more or less free to roam for a good year. And that's only, again, part of it. If a Carrington event took place, I'm not just talking to the United States, but the entire Western world would be absolutely be the worst single catastrophe we could possibly face. Now, what are the chances of a Carrington event taking place in 2012? We know that Carrington events are going to happen again. Well, they've happened, recently. Last one's 1964, and the last big one was 1850. Geophysicists believe that event that took place in 1850, which was huge and would cripple our civilization, was probably smaller than other Carrington events that have happened in the past. Of course, we didn't have electricity before 1850, and that will happen in the future. So a really big Carrington event would really do our civilization in. It creates what is known as a cascade effect. That's how they refer to it. A cascade effect is when it overloads one power station to such a degree that it overloads all the other power stations. And the power stations are not just located locally, like in your city or town. Energy the people get in California sometimes come as far as Texas or Utah. So it's all interconnected. There's no way you can shut this down. What are the chances of this happening? That's what I looked into. I thought, well, now a Carrington event. That sounds like something the Maya talked about. They're not talking necessarily about great flames of fire coming to the earth. They don't say that. They say that it would be a sun demon, a satanic figure coming from the sun. But it's not necessarily to burn the place up, to bring destruction, they say. Well, this would certainly bring destruction. Carrington event can happen any time. Carrington events are associated with sunspot activity. Sunspots are not little spots. They look that way to us because the sun is 93 million miles away. Sunspots are typically bigger than the entire Earth. They're usually larger than the planet Jupiter. In other words, they can be anywhere from 3 times the size of the Earth to about 20 times the size of the Earth. And sunspots are solar storms. They're great concentrations of energy. And that when these solar storms take off and erupt out of the surface of the sun, they shoot out immense concentrations of energy, electromagnetic energy. And if you're in the way of that electromagnetic energy, whatever you have that runs on electricity is toast. And that's what causes the northern lights. When you see that's the interaction of the solar activity. Okay, well, what about 2012? The sun at this time is going through a period in which there are virtually no sunspots. It's really weird. If you go on the internet and find out through NASA sunspot activity, you'll see for the past couple of years, and especially this year, sunspot activity is dwindling. Nobody knows why. Well, that sounds pretty safe, doesn't it? We don't have any of these big solar storms taking place. Trouble is, there is a definite correlation between the lack of sunspot activity and soon after a proliferation of sunspot activity. Usually when the sun goes blank like that, you can expect shortly thereafter there is going to be major sunspot activity. And again, if you go on the internet, as I did, you will see that astrophysicists are expecting major sunspot activity in 2012. Now, this is not theoretical stuff, folks. The people at NASA have just launched a multi-million dollar, the most expensive satellite they have ever put into space. It is a solar probe. And this solar probe was launched last January specifically to monitor the sun. And if you go on the NASA website, you'll see that the reason why they're sending this thing up is to do research, of course, on the sun, and also to warn against a Carrington event. Now, this satellite, which is the most advanced of its kind, if it can see a major eruption on the sun that's headed towards the Earth that would prevent a Carrington event from taking place. And the warning would go out. NASA would then have a direct line to the White House, and the White House has to give orders to shut down all the electrical grid in the United States. That in itself is catastrophic. Now, the warning that we would have from this solar probe, as I understand it, is not very long. It depends on the nature of the solar eruption. We may have as much as a 4-hour warning or as much as no warning. Given at its optimum, okay, let's say we got a 4-hour warning. NASA satellite, the solar satellite says, yeah, there's a major solar eruption taking place. They're going to shoot all this electromagnetic energy at the Earth, and you got 4 hours. I find it extremely difficult to accept that the entire electrical grid of the Western world, not just the United States, will shut down voluntarily in 4 hours.
Well, that's if they would even tell us. Without going into
they wouldn't have time to.
They
wouldn't have time to tell us. They wouldn't have time to tell us. They would just be able to shut it down in 4 hours. That's it. So that's rough. Now, maybe they've got that kind of discipline in North America. I don't know. I find that hard to accept. But I do not believe that all of the electrical grid across India and China and Russia and Western Europe would, okay, we found out we're going to shut it down. If they don't, then all of those other places in the world, they're fried when that happens. They're toast. The effect on the global economy, especially at a time like this, would be cataclysmic. They also admit, the NASA scientists admit, that there is a real problem with the satellite, because if an eruption of the sun takes place when the solar probe is positioned behind the Earth, and it always is at a certain point, there's a period where it's not able to see the sun, to monitor the sun, then we have no warning whatsoever. But it's interesting, isn't it, that here just now, just in January, this last January, NASA got their solar satellite up and running. So am I saying that this will definitely happen? That there's definitely going to be a Carrington event taking place on December 21st, 2012? No, I'm not saying. I don't make predictions. But I'm saying that it is conceivable. It is absolutely conceivable that this might, in fact, happen. And my research is based not on channeling or my own opinions. This research, and I've included it in the book, in my bibliography, anybody can do. It's mostly internet research. Thank God for the internet. I don't think I'd be able to find it otherwise. Going to major sites like NASA. So I think that it's conceivable that a Carrington event will take place around that time, an ice age is possible, but more likely is the Carrington event. And if the Carrington event is not stopped worldwide, the consequences for our civilization would be at least as bad as if a solar flare had incinerated the Earth. The social dislocation would be unimaginable. And how a civilization could survive such a thing, especially ours, and it's a very fragile moment right now, is rough. Now, do the Mayas say that this is going to be the end of mankind? They kind of suggest that, actually. They do, however, give out a little hope. They say that if human beings can somehow reestablish their basic fundamental relationship with the Creator and natural law, that we will survive. If enough of us can do that, we will survive, and that we can go on. But they're pretty glum about it, actually. They don't really offer too much beyond that of that happening. So that, and the remarkable thing about the Maya, to get back to, and I think this is especially pertinent with your program, how could the Maya
we have 8 million. Oh, you're going to answer my question I was going to ask you. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to say, I think it's pertinent to your program. How on earth could the Maya or the Atlanteans, whoever built this calendar, how could they have known about sunrise on the summer solstice of 2012? Because we do know astronomically an incredibly unique event is going to take place in which two ecliptics are going to cross in such a way that they form a kind of a cross in the heavens. And this cross will be over something called the Dark Rift. This is an area of the heavens. This is an optical illusion, as it were, that will only be seen from the Earth. It will not make sense anyplace else. But nonetheless, it's a galactic alignment that will take place on the morning of December 21st, 2012. This is now understood. And that, at the very least, is going to happen. Now, the Maya said that this is just a sign for it, that this is just as a... One moment, please. Okay, this is just a sign of things that will happen.
It boggles my mind that they
and
even
how could they have known? How could
knew
they have
about
known
it?
See, now, if the Maya were great observers, if they were great astronomers, they could.
But not every 3,000 years or 26,000 years, which is the
it's
whole length of the calendar.
It's more than that, because this event either has happened like 20,000 years ago, or it else has never happened before. Astronomers are divided over that. Some astronomers, about 50% of them, say that this event that's going to take place, this astronomical event, has never happened before. How on earth? I don't care how observant people are over generations of time, where they can figure out, sure, the nodules of Venus, and they can figure out the phases of the moon. All that, I can see that information be preserved. But how can you know about an event that has either happened 20,000 years before, or else has never happened before? This is the great, real mystery of this. And yet, it's not a coincidence, because the Maya said that this is going to be that's associated. This is like an astronomical symbol for what's going to take place. My conclusion is, and this is where it gets far out, because the whole thing is far out, but this is where it gets really far out. In my own mind, and I try to explain this in the book, and I think maybe your listeners can understand this, I think that the Maya astral projected. I don't think that the Maya were all that interested in observing the stars and so on. They did that. I think that they were there. I think that they extended their consciousness backwards and forwards into time, into space, and I think that they saw that. I think they did something we call now remote viewing. Our society, of course, on the whole, regards such things as nonsense and superstition, but if you have a whole society that accepts it as real and practices it, I think that they were millennia ahead of us in psychic development, and that is how the Maya knew about these things. Of course, our own government now has been dabbling in remote viewing. We know all about that. That's been disclosed. We know for at least 20 years, 15 or 20 years, they were into it, and it's believed that they're suspected at least that they still are. And I think that the Maya were expert travelers through space and time. I think that they were masters of remote viewing, and that is how they got this information. Otherwise, there's no explanation how they could have possibly known about such a unique event as is going to take place on the morning of December 21st, 2012. With that in a nutshell.
Or even the ones that happened prior to that. You know,
exactly.
The other endings of the world. It's like, well, how do you know about that?
How they know about that?
I mean, they were living in little stone huts. You know, hunter-gatherer people.
Supposedly.
Sorry, that's like my ongoing joke. So.
Yeah, but not really. So I think that these people preserve that in their calendar, and that they that's what they're talking about. When I began this investigation, I had no preconceived ideas about it at all. I wanted to know the truth. What did the Maya really say? What does science really say? Is there any correlation between the two? So that's the only reason why I went into this thing. The other half of the book is, I take up a lot with Edgar Cayce, because I think he was like one of them. His consciousness certainly roamed the heavens and backwards and forwards into time. There are limitations that we know of were illimitable to him. So his material, I think, backs up some of this. But that, in a nutshell, is what the book is about.
But I think that's interesting, because I think Edgar Cayce was like an excellent remote viewer. I mean, because there's two forms of remote viewing, and one is going into a trance-like state with somebody asking you questions, which is exactly what Cayce did.
That's right. I believe his method, his modus operandi was different than today's, but you're right. He was a kind of a remote viewer. He just went about it differently, but the results were basically the same. So that basically is the premise of my book, which is called Atlantis 2012. It's just come out, and it's got a couple of nice reviews so far. And I hope that...
I know we just kind of like touched the surface. I mean, there's so much more to it.
Right.
That I had this whole list of questions, you know, and we got to 3.
Oh, I talk too much.
So we really just touched the surface.
Well...
No, very interesting. You know, this is it's good stuff, and so people that are listening, it's a good read. Interesting, well written, just packed full of good stuff.
Well, you're packed full of good stuff, Rita. So.
So, do you have a new project coming up?
Yes, I do.
Any secret details you want to leak out in advance?
Well, there are 2 lakes in the Midwest that I'm going to be investigating with our infrared camera. One is called Foot Lake in Minnesota, where there are supposedly 2 walls at the bottom of this lake, man-made walls. And then there's Rock Lake in Wisconsin, which I've been investigating for a number of years, and there is a pyramid at the bottom of that lake, which we're also going to we already found it, and we're going to relocate it, hopefully, and get some good photographs of it with our infrared camera.
Cool. Perfect. There's the music, which means we got to go, Frank.
Okay.
Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with the listeners.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope we can do it again sometime.
You know we can. All right. That's Frank Joseph, author of Atlantis in 2012. I'm sure the book's available at Amazon or your local bookstore. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. We'll be back after words from our sponsor.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
As you work in alignment with your highest good, let them help you to release negative thoughts and emotions and clear away any limitations that may be keeping you from experiencing your full potential. Walk down the path to health, healing, understanding, and enlightenment with Meditating on the Kabbalah. Order your copy today at www.soulhealer.com. That's right, that's www.soulhealer.com.
Move past the crossroads in your life and discover alternative solutions to your deepest concerns at soulhealer.com. So whether it's a physical problem, an emotional issue, a question about work, or troubles in your relationship, naturopath and medical intuitive Dr. Rita Louise can help you. Bring peace, harmony, and health back into your life. Schedule a session today. Visit soulhealer.com right away and live the life you've been dreaming of.
Start the year off right by visiting livinggrocery.com. Experience the miracle of real nutrition as it helps you to lose weight and improve your overall health. Don't mess with pills or capsules. We provide the highest quality, all-natural organic foods that come ready to eat. And best of all, it's delivered straight to your door. Visit livinggrocery.com now and experience your own amazing transformation.